Popped it in and I was watching it and shit and kind of getting into it bit by bit. And suddenly I was getting back in touch with a version of me that I hadn't seen in a while. The guy that really liked comics and had time for comics and had time for hockey and shit. And it was almost like I'd put it down 15 years ago and suddenly picked it back up with this DVD. And during this mini-series, like they introduced Wayne Gretzky at a certain point. Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player that ever lived, considered by most, roundly. And they introduced not just Wayne, but they introduced his father, Walter Gretzky. And Walter Gretzky just comes across as like the sweetest, nicest old man you'll ever meet and shit. And he's full of homespun fucking wisdom and whatnot. So I don't know, for some reason I really gravitated to her. And dudes started talking about his kid. Like, and in one of the things he's going, you know, when Wayne was a little boy, he would come and set his hockey equipment out on the floor, you know, in the kitchen before we'd go play games. I'd take him over to the game. And one day I remember he was doing that, and this is in one of his last seasons with the Nadrowski Steelers, and he goes, Dad, there's a little boy on my team who hasn't had a goal all year long, so tonight I'm going to try to help him score a goal. And that boy scored 2 goals that night. And I was watching that going, get the fuck out of here, man. Like, really? And I rewound the story because I couldn't fucking believe it. And that boy scored 2 goals that night. And I was like, wow, it just fucking blew my mind because, like, it's not American. You know what I'm saying? It's just not an American sentiment. Like, the American version of that story would be like, Dad, there's a little boy who hasn't scored any goals all year for our team. So tonight, me and the boys are going to beat him with bricks. Just put a bunch of bars of soap in a sock so it doesn't leave a bruise, Dad, and hit him really fucking hard, and that'll teach him to fucking play. You just didn't hear that. Like, all of a sudden, there was a story of this little fucking kid, man, who was, like, so good at something, he was still thinking about other people and shit. He was so touched and whatnot. He was like, I'm gonna help this kid. And I was fucking blown away by that, man. I'm sitting in my library fucking watching the fucking thing, and I was just like, oh, my God, man, that really happened? I gotta tell Jen. So I get up, and I fucking leave my office, and I go down the hallway, past the Mickey Mouse picture, to the door, open the door, and I jump into the room, and I was like, hey. And she's on the couch on her computer. She's like, hey. She looks back down. I was like, did you know that when he was a little boy, Wayne Gretzky said that he was going to help this teammate of his score a goal, hadn't scored all year, and he helped him fucking score 2 that night. And she goes, who the fuck is Wayne Gretzky? And I go, what are you talking about? Wayne Gretzky's the greatest hockey player that ever lived. She's like, so? And I was like, well, when he was a kid, he helped this guy score goals. She's like, and what does this have to do with us? And I said, I'm not going to sit here and listen to you run down Gretzky. And I slammed the door. Fucking went back to my office and shit. I'm like, she doesn't fucking understand a goddamn thing, you know. Smoke another joint. Watch the fucking video and shit. And Walter Gretzky keeps telling you shit about his son. Like, you know, there's a point where Wayne Gretzky, in case you don't know, the most goals ever fucking scored in the history of hockey belong to Wayne Gretzky. But to put it in layman's terms, if you look at another record, it's far more impressive. Scoring goals for a scoring genius is pretty typical and pretty easy, particularly if you're a scoring genius like Wayne Gretzky. What you look at is the other side of his record, the assists. Now, an assist is when, like, I pass you the puck, you put the puck in the net, for those of you that don't follow. Wayne Gretzky, who is the greatest hockey player in the world, who could pretty much like walk up to a net and just sneeze the puck into it, would basically get right up to the fucking line and shit, and then just pass it over to somebody else and be like, go, do it. And they did it. And I was so fucking blown away by that. I was like, oh my God, could you imagine being so fucking good at something, but letting somebody else is so fucking generous of spirit. And I was like, I gotta go tell Jen. And I went down the hallway, past the Mickey Mouse, and I opened up the door, and I was just like, do you know Gretzky's fucking assist record is more than double of his fucking score record? And she was like, that's nice, Kevin. What's an assist? And I was like, an assist is when somebody passes the goal to somebody else to put in the net. And then she was just like, you're very interested in this young hockey player. And I was like, I don't think he's young. This shit happened 20 years ago. And she's like, I'm glad to see that you're into something and whatnot, you know, but don't forget that we've got some dinner tonight to go out to with Harley. And I was like, we're going out to dinner. I'm watching this DVD. And she's like, well, you can press pause. And I was like, you're trying to take me away from Gretzky, and it's not going to happen. Slam, you know. Back down to my office, man, smoke another joint, get deeper into the story of the Gretzkys and whatnot. Walter Gretzky is Wayne Gretzky's almost his best friend biographer beyond just father. From a young age, we have footage of Wayne Gretzky skating, like almost his first skate. We have footage of his first goal as he puts the puck between his grandmother's legs as she sits on a Barca-lounger and shit like that. Walter Gretzky was always around, handy with a camera or a Super 8, and capturing footage of his son all the time, so that now you can go back and look at it. It's crazy. You can watch Wayne Gretzky's development through his youth. It was his father was his chronicler. His biggest fan was the guy who was always there taping him from the time he was a little sprout all the way up to when he was playing in the NHL. So I'm watching this thing. I'm like, I love this, man. This kind of shit amazes me. This is great. Then everything gets somber because they start talking about Walter Gretzky had an aneurysm. And I was like, no, not Walter Gretzky. But where's that other joint? You know, I have to get really fucking centered for this. And they start talking about Walter had a massive aneurysm at one point, kind of fell down at his mother's farm and whatnot, which he was taking care of. She's long past. They got to him enough time, brought him to the hospital, and were able to save his life for the moment. But at the same time, they didn't know how long they were going to be able to save him, so they reached out to all the children and whatnot, and they were like, you got called Wayne Gretzky as well as his brothers and sisters, so you have to get back to Brantford now. Everybody, the whole Gretzky family comes back to Brantford and whatnot. Walter is hanging on by a fucking thread. Then the fucking information hits, which blows my fucking mind. So he had the aneurysm, and they saved his life. But when he came to, they started talking to Walter, and Walter started speaking in a language nobody really recognized. And so they brought his brother in, and his brother listened to him, and he's like, he's talking about feeding the chickens. He's speaking Belarus. He's speaking like the language of our forefathers, of our grandparents when they came over. But what had happened was the aneurysm wiped out about 20 years of Walter Gretzky's memories, including and especially every amazing achievement that his son had ever made. So the man who was the greatest chronicler and greatest fan of the greatest hockey player in the world, the one guy who gave a shit the most, can't remember a fucking thing. And I'm watching this, and I'm about to cry. And I go, I gotta tell Jen. And I fucking open the thing, past the Mickey Mouse, and I open up the door. I'm like, oh God! He doesn't fucking remember! And she's like, who? Is the dog dead? And I was like, no. Walter Gretzky doesn't fucking remember anything about what his son did. He had an aneurysm and he lost it all. She goes, Kevin, you are taking this family way too seriously. She's going, I think one of two things has to happen. You have to shut the DVD player off, or when you're going to watch the Gretzky stories, don't smoke weed. And I was like, you just hate Gretzky. And I slammed the door and fucking walked back. But what I was doing in that room was trying to figure out what had happened to me. And for some reason, Wayne Gretzky made it kind of clear. I don't know what it was. It wasn't so much Wayne himself. It wasn't so much, I guess maybe his accomplishments, maybe because it had nothing to do with what I do and shit. But for some reason, there was something about that man that fucking spoke to me. And it was probably this piece of advice that his father gave to him that fucking struck me like a freight train. When his father was training Wayne, because his father was Wayne's first coach as well, his father would take him out into a backyard ice rink that he built himself right behind their house for his son to sit there and play hockey on and shit. And he would say to his son, Wayne, when you're playing, don't go where the puck is. You want to go where the puck's gonna be.